What is up, guys? It's your boy, Top of the Meta Cacus, and today, Bungie just released a huge new update, a weapon tuning preview leading into Lightfall. So they revealed a bunch of the things getting buffed and nerfed when Lightfall launches in Season 20. So let's dive in. First things first, guys, they actually are adding a red reticle to PC. Currently, when you're playing on console, the reticle will turn red if it's over an enemy that's inside your weapon's effective range, and so this is moving to PC as well, so pretty interesting. Moving on from there, linear fusion rifles, the absolute meta of the meta of the meta in PvE. They say, you probably saw this coming, guys, they reduce the damage versus champions, mini bosses, bosses, and vehicles by 15%. But Sleeper Simulant and Queenbreaker are unaffected. That's very interesting because Sleeper Simulant, Queenbreaker's trash, that won't make a difference. Sleeper Simulant, however, is actually pretty good. So that could become a more viable choice next season. And even with this nerf, linears are still going to be pretty effective, but we're going to have to see how they compare to other weapons next season. Moving on from there, guys, machine guns. They say that machine guns have been buffed a few times over the past year, but only in PvE. So they're actually making some more PvP focused changes, but they do say this buff also applies across the board in PvE. So they've increased the damage by 10% with the following effects on time to kill against a Guardian with tier 6 resilience. So for high impact frames, the time to kill is going from 0.67 seconds to 0.5. Rapid fire frames are going from 0.53 to 0.47, and adaptive frames are unchanged. So, again, 10% bonus damage also applies in PvE. That's pretty insane. But another change is that they've increased the reserve ammo by 50% at 0 inventory stat and 20% at 100 inventory stat. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, they say 0 to 100 inventory stat, the value is behind the scenes. This is presented as the actual number of rounds in the game, but you can take this to mean that low reserve machine guns get a big boost, while large reserve machine guns get a smaller boost. So overall, guys, in Season 20, machine guns are going to be doing 10% more damage, and pretty much all of them are going to have better reserves. And like Bungie said, they've been buffed several times over the last year. Right now, stuff like the Thunderlord is already very, very good. Could these become really high in the meta starting in Season 20? We'll have to wait and see. But moving on from there, guys, we have some changes to heavy grenade launches. Once upon a time, these were the meta, and after a nerf, they've really fallen behind. But here are the changes. They've increased damage versus champions, mini bosses, bosses, and vehicles by 20%, and to miners by 40%. They've also improved projectile collision, making it slightly easier to land hits, and they increased the blast radius by 1 meter. But Parasite is unaffected because it already does insane damage. So, wow, this is a very interesting change. This is actually the same damage increase that they gave machine guns recently, and again, it wasn't quite enough for them to really break into the top of the meta, but stuff like Thunderlord did really start seeing a lot more play. So, is this going to make heavy grenade launchers meta next season? Honestly, I think there's a pretty good chance. First of all, a lot of legendary heavy grenade launchers in the game right now have insane PvE god rolls. Like, I can go into my vault and get stuff with, autoloading full court spike grenades, no problem, right? So all that stuff is really accessible. A lot of them were like world drop weapons. I'm sure a lot of you guys have cracked PvE god roll heavy grenade launchers like ready to go. In addition to that, guys, these are getting buffed, and the top of the meta, linears, are getting nerfed. So there's definitely more of a role they can play now with the competition lowering and them going up. Not to mention that special grenade launchers are very, very good. Stuff like the Forbearance, blinding grenade launchers, all of that stuff. So you can easily make a build where you're using a special and a heavy grenade launcher, and then your ammo mods for your armor, finders, and scavengers are gonna play double duty. Very, very good. Moving on from there, guys, for shotguns. They say the new shotgun reticles show the correct spread pattern, but shotgun reticles now change in size proportional to spread angle. And a related note, the Legend of Acreus hipfire reticle is now a bit more representative of its very large spread angle. Moving on from there, guys, really interesting change to kinetic weapons. They say that kinetic slot weapons have always done 5% more damage versus unshielded targets in PvE. This meant that kinetic slot stasis weapons were straight up better with extra functionality and no downside. So here are some of the changes. Kinetic primary weapon damage multiplier increased from 1.05 to 1.1. So they went from 5% bonus damage to 10% bonus damage. Kinetic special weapons, they're going from 1.05 to 1.15, 5% to 15% more damage. Kinetic slot stasis weapons no longer have the 5% damage bonus versus unshielded targets in PvE, and there's also a kinetic damage type perk coming in Lightfall. Very, very interesting. So now, guys, you're going to have to, especially with the special weapon change here, like, you're going to have to now weight this 15% bonus damage against other DPS weapons in the energy slot. Stuff like the Heritage Shotgun and the Secession Sniper just became 10% better, doing 10% more damage. That is really going to matter in, for example, a raid boss damage phase. So really keep that in mind in Lightfall. Moving on from there, guys, for exotics. A lot of exotics being changed. First of all, the Queenbreaker's blinding effect was underwhelming for a heavy weapon, so we've changed how that's deployed. So the shot now chains to nearby enemies and uses Arc 3.0 blind. So it is going to synergize with your Arc 3.0 build. And again, it didn't get nerfed with the rest of the linears. Maybe it will be usable next season. The Ruinous Effigy, moving on, feels very voidy, and what they're doing is that the Transmutation Sphere Slam attack now suppresses enemies. So basically like setting off a blinding grenade. Very, very interesting. Moving on, the Leviathan's Breath. So now this is going to apply Volatile on perfect draw impact, and they increase the damage from 396 to 442. This allows it to once again one-hit kill all supers in PvP. And they increase the damage versus champions by 30%. Like, unironically, Leviathan's Breath meta next season? Like, these are some pretty saucy changes. Moving on from there, guys, the 1000 Voices. So each explosion now applies 10 plus 5 with Ember of Ashes Scorch stacks. So it's basically just going to outright do more damage because it's also applying damage over time Scorch, but because it's applying so many explosions, you're going to probably ignite the enemy you're shooting at, which is also going to apply even more damage. That's pretty interesting. Next up, the Sunshot Exotic Hand Cannon. The explosion on kill now applies 10 and plus 5 with Ember of Ashes Scorch stacks. So Sunshot now way more synergistic with your Solar 3.0 build. Moving on from there, Polaris Lance. The Perfect Fifth shots now apply 40 plus potentially 20 Scorch stacks instead of a custom burn. Again, way more synergistic with your subclasses. The Two-Tailed Fox had tough competition, but what they're doing now is that the Solar Rocket now applies 60 plus 30 Scorch stacks instead of burn, and the Void Rocket already suppresses, and the Catalyst completes the trifecta. Wow, very interesting. Especially because I just looked it up and the Two-Tailed Fox doesn't have a catalyst. So Bungie is just revealing that next season, the Two-Tailed Fox catalyst is going to be added, and it says it completes the trifecta, which I'm thinking means that they're going to add a third Arc rocket, the trifecta of Solar, Void, and now Arc. That would be nutty. 3 rockets at once and potentially Arc if it caused something like a blinding effect, or heck, if it jolted. Dude, the Two-Tailed Fox could be insane next season. Moving on from there, guys, the Prometheus Lens. So they've added the Incandescent perk to the Catalyst. So now Prometheus Lens has Incandescent, which is one of the best perks in the game. Okay. The Grand Overture Exotic Machine Gun. They've switched the Catalyst to use Arc Blind, so more synergistic. And moving on from there, guys, lastly, they're starting to experiment with hipfire reticles that purvey more information. So the Manticore, they say, as a test bed for this, you can expect to see more weapon type or exotic weapon functionality showing up in hipfire reticles in Season 21 and beyond. And they say they added the reticle element to the Manticore, showing the current stacks of your anti-grav repulsor. And then, guys, moving on from there, we've got some changes to weapon perks. They say with Strand coming to the game, along with new Strand weapon damage perks, we've updated a couple of older perks. So Osmosis is now going to work with Strand, and Elemental Capacitor, if you're using a Strand subclass, you get plus 20, plus 25 with the enhanced perk, Airborne Effectiveness. Next up, Rewind rounds, which currently only appear on Vault of Glass weapons, are going to start spawning on non-Vault of Glass weapons starting next season. And Rewind rounds, which give you rounds back if you land the last half of the magazine precision, can be really good. Like, you can do some pretty crazy high DPS stuff with combining those rounds back and a damage increasing perk. Moving on from there, guys, Eager Edge, they say, had some bugs that needed addressing in a previous release. So, it no longer deactivates when moving faster than 35 meters per second. It deactivates correctly after a single melee swing. They reduced the base lunge distance buff from 2 to 1.8 meters probably. They reduced the airborne lunge distance penalty from 25% to 20%. The enhanced perk now increases lunge distance slightly back up to 2. Next up, for blinding grenades on grenade launchers, well, they don't always do arc damage, so it's not appropriate for them to trigger Arc 3.0 blind effects, and so they're actually going to rename blinding grenades to disorienting grenades. It's going to be like its own category. Moving on, a Viced Stinger. It's one of the most desirable origin traits in the game, like by far. So this was typically a full reload when the perk activated, but now it's going to reload 25% of the magazine instead. So huge nerf to Viced Stinger, which is really, guys, going to combine with that linear fusion nerf. Linear fusions were the main recipient of Viced Stinger. That's when you could really combine with that origin trait and do insane damages. So this is basically a hard nerf to the best of the linear fusion rifles. And lastly, guys, they've got a section called The Future, where they say, we're already hard at work on seasons 21 and 22, and some of the changes we're making include adding a full auto melee accessibility setting, which applies in all forms of melee, a pass-over weapon type and exotic weapon hipfire reticles, including increasing how visually they change even at a high field of view, and adding features like charge meters to exotic perk counters. We've also got balance changes in the works, but a little too early to get into them. We'll have more information to share post-Lightfall. So, really interesting changes here, guys. I think some of the main takeaways is like, invest in linear fusion rifle alternatives for DPS. Heavy grenade launchers are looking really good, and even machine guns are going to be doing more damage as well. You might have to replace your Taipan next season. Guys, that is it for the video. Hope you enjoyed and found this informative. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That is linked in the description down below. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.